Hello. America, I was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer next to the World Trade Center. Right before the attack on the World Trade Center in Manhattan. I'm from Connecticut. The people at the World Trade Center, there were people at the World Trade Center. You know, God bless them. Everyone tied to them. Except for where they're jumping into the conversations here. With exceptions too. Where they sought me out. In other words, all sides of criminal and civil cases, originally and still. At the same time, overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, and a breaching method that was worse than that was entrenched at the same time, keeping people putting the same sequence shifts, not even realizing self-value. Because when you entertain, regardless if you're forced to entertain, roles with and as functions, you know, by functions and programmed by a breaching method, that which is true always, what the slavery was about. There's a judge Napolitano with the Judging Freedom website, and there's something through the subjects on his live streams that is discernible, where how at countries A through Z, at formal law locations, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, they have styles of fact-keeping nature, self-valuing, reliant upon self-value, the same sequence shifts, reliant upon how distinctly at campuses A through Z, other has been communicated for Georgia, for James Madison and our founders behind him his plan, and then further as a president, and then further as, you know, his plan and the founders behind him were coupled with George Washington, who agreed to help them and to use that plan and to counter-extort the other, enforce the other founders to break the rules of the crazy breaching method that was manifested by, as per nature's demonstrations of it too, as a torture, extortion, slavery method. And the difference of that. So in other words, we need a quality of fact-keeping nature. Things that we have to examine Boolean logic and descriptions of Boolean logic and of algorithms. These are criminal re-engineerings of proper treatments and awareness by the short words, black pupils. We have that hyper program projected to us as a breaching method, but greater than it, more finite than it, and with active relativity to it and to us is what we could use to discern it, even though it is hyper invisible, but still discernible. It is a constant identity of value/value progression as value. A human fact-keeping nature breaching method, for example, being one of the things that are true always. That was the value of those laws against everyone, sickly distinctly, and where and how it was sickly non-distinctly against everyone too. If anyone would bring that up, because there was all kinds of nature, self-shows, all kinds of rewards to bring it up, and punishments not to. But self-valued is going systems other than nature's, other than the hyper-native pure. To appreciate America, you have to discern. To appreciate any modern country's history, so they tell other, because they are suits and ties, counters and exceptions. That are styles where they fight with each other. They contain quality aspects of nature that are a demonstration of the significance of other being and having been communicated for George Washington, for James Madison, and for our founders behind him and his plan that George Washington agreed to use and to help. Slavery having stayed entrenched is proof. Northern colonies and southern colonies is proof. /S, and our Americans as we are actually grouped. See, it takes, in other words, there are people grouped again further now. This guy works there, this guy's always there. Oh, I heard this from this guy there. And people will jump into conversations like online. The agencies have been changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded, and no one's checking. When did it stop being about, even if it's completely made up, witch trials? There's things that it was about no matter what. There's a witch trial place right where next to the spot, Webb House. They changed it then to Webb Stevens House. There are syntax tied to this. Increasingly names tied to ones on Valley Crest in Wethersfield, for example, sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. Roles with, the World Trade Center attack through other natures of predicate acts that they know at least it's plausible, aimed with their people they said they're their extended cousins. So they have roles with these countries, all sides, at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College has a Darth Vader, a police form named Darth Vader, who's involved with a whole bunch of people from different parts of Wethersfield, involved with retired police chiefs and a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital with the security, with the medical, and with the lawyers there, and with the names of the houses and businesses next to them. Involved time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, their patients, their family members, the family members of campuses, all running into, like, including fire campuses, running into high live progressions at the same time. And at the same time, in other words, with all these different countries, there are Russians and Ukraine roles with their doctors, and maybe some as them, and ones with badges, and foreign and domestic military associated with other hospitals, not just Hartford Hospital. But Hartford Hospital has an Institute of Living that was founded on their campus in 1822. With slavery still entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. But Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, is the capital of Connecticut, has roles. It's like, a short horse ride from where George Washington had to come to counter extort and sleep and force, other founders at Wethersfield, Connecticut. Had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, because everyone was fact, cheated, nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. And that was causing things that everyone had to blame on other things, others themselves, with that slavery. Otherwise, they would be sentenced and through their own, because everyone else next to them will be hurt. We are in a fact, cheating nature trap. How would they keep roles with that from overseas when it was sickly, distinctly against all sides? And nature shows us this. But we have people, right here, especially online, we could force equality of fact, human nature for the species body everywhere it is. All we have to do is take account for what they, in other words, a whole bunch more and more people have self-value roles, directions to hide lies. I'm bound on things that aren't even, real things. In other words, when did they have integrity at countries A through Z with the suits and ties? I'm not saying to blame people. I'm saying when we're going to blame people and where we have to react to things syntactically, we don't leave out the breaching method. Clearer than day. The suburbs are designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, be a landscape fear, not realizing, not remembering, not fathoming even. The significance of how, for example, in the suburbs were, in other words, Native Americans against Native Americans, when they speak about what's practical, about what came before, how come no one ever takes into account how all the databases were criminally foreign influence, roles with a torture, extortion, slavery method, because you have had other measured and maintained collusions at countries A through Z, is just most concentrated at medical and fire campuses and campuses of each age and nature, because there are connections between those differences too, because it's a differences racket method. A whole bunch of people died, the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people with the name Demoro are involved with these old Weathersfield locations, and next to them with WTNH. WTNH it has sources all along Route 175 and its conjunctions that planted fake ties to me and fake natures of ties to me, other ones. In other words, they take the picture next to you, and then they say things, you don't respond, they punish you, and you find out about it years later. And that's one's involved with the World Trade Center attack, but it has something to do with that. Two speech class teachers I had too are increasingly involved with people involved with Washington, D.C. and the World Trade Center attack from years before it, as people that were involved with insidious names at the World Trade Center, at the spots next to it, including the Ninth Circuit Court next to it, involved with changing the date of legal papers in the court that day, and with names on all sides of that case, brought up by the officer switching names to make confessions over here, intercities, like with the detective Samuda, involved also with some black KKK theme, Confederate flag theme when I was a kid, and now a Latino theme, Italian theme, collusions with differences rackets. Increasingly, that there are people that have roles of predicate acts and predicate acts methods that I didn't even know them as a kid. They're putting fake things in databases. In other words, and when the ones that, and there was tied to the ones that you're next to, they're playing a game where they're lying about whether you think. In other words, they communicate. They're recorded a whole bunch of ways consciously, pretending they don't realize, but they make people use their names, and they say, "Oh, well, why are they saying our name?" They brought it up. There's sequence shifts. These are the same ones involved with sequence shifts too. Other and it's named switching. These are officers switching and forging names, fabricating police roles. So Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed to me. They have roles with people involved with Hartford Hospital. A whole bunch of people from Hartford Hospital have roles planting evidences with names and from Weathersfield, Connecticut. Also involved with insidiousness on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut through time. Chris Walters, Eric Jensen. These are all people involved with federal evidences, crimes on my street, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded by people involved with state police, forensics, Weathersfield police chiefs retired, and as groups involved with proven first forced child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, who had time collusion /S with use /S of all the negative things and natures that cause, and illusions. Increasingly, people involved with the corners of streets, like at Old Weathersfield with WTNH. They have rules of people on corners of streets planting evidences and identity theft, fraud, slanders rules with WFSB. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves. So I am not a lawyer, I'm not a journalist, but journalists are recorded, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes. So, for example, when things like wars come up, in other words, and questions and things like that, where there are names uses, there is a Boolean logic that is using and has used exceptions, exception nature, tactical ulterior. The information we are given from kids, in other words, they're told to self-value, criminal insidiousness, natures of positives. I'm not even a lawyer, and negative treatments that are tactical ulterior from how our founders communicate. Our founders communicated for us to blame what it was actually on, all true always, what slavery was about, which was the human fact, treatment, nature, breaching method. They had all roles, all enslaved. Fact, human nature, therefore physically. There was no wealth. All natures of wealth were through countries themselves, like that state the North and South was in. Not because our founders told us to get slavery explained that way. It was stayed entrenched, and they had nothing they could do to counter it because they had to force the other founders to be founders. There are three natures of ways that Native Americans are our founders. There are three natures of Native, ways they are our founders. See, president / chief, with James Madison, and the others behind them. I mean, the others as that body of resistance and of preservation to the republic for which we stand, abridged, but with the directions to get unabridged, and while valuing that why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. See the difference between when it comes down to fact treatment nature, collusion /S, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, counters to them, the people jailing them, the people associated with their medical. There were torture methods at countries A through Z that have nothing to do with torture, just identity theft, fraud, slanders, torture. In other words. So, intercities and intra-cities, a whole bunch of police departments have roles with the same house /S. You can take each one singular. In other words, involved with police in courts switching and forging names, and with lawyers that are increasingly collusions with names on all sides of cases, and the courts. And the difference of that is used too, because there are not just foreign names involved, and sense and sensibilities on off campuses shared together here and there. See, we're at the other side of suits and ties, counters and exceptions. These are like a little broken kids that came through campuses A through Z, and the difference of that, from the best ones to the worst ones, the difference of that is used too remotely, where they may fact treatment nature, quality aspects of nature. We have black people's whites of eyes. We know beliefs are needed, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly at all locations /S relative to worse than criminal incompetence. We just left out with the most serious subjects. Serious not for aggression in speech, but where, for example, if needed, that's proper. We have only had that to keep bullying logic, collusion /S. They increasingly the intelligence communities at countries A through Z, they're only capable of self-valuing without even realizing why and how. They have their roles with use /S of kids confess that they're increasingly being they're the time where people are going to walk. This is going on now, see, but sometimes it's where they are victim predator. I mean, victim /hyper victims. Why this happens? Some ways it's because the overt criminal enterprise, and the difference of that too, because where there are the estimations of things, there is that criminal incompetence. For example, where there are sides with syntactically as valued with attrition. Judge Napolitano has a Scott Ritter who speaks on attrition, which, in other words, like in a boxing match, people are trying to break each other down. See, but where this has gone down everyone's using the names. Everyone left out the breaching method. Our founders declassified things that show that they want us to appreciate the breaching method. Singular. That made all plural roles and to hide behind it, not just then, but now. Vaccines. It's not just because people need to feed themselves and have water, not just only if they have a plastic bottle. Nature communicates with it as a system that we could ignore, but it forces our special difference from here, lethal IDs, but worse than death. And this is what nature showed the ancients of pantheism, who were led by the hyper-simultaneous. It is more probable and practical. And so with this hyper-intelligence presents the needs to take positions and counter positions. Because all have grown up, you keep fake at all locations, areas, and states and online. You're going to keep the difference between the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the terrorists, the three branches of government's names there, the names of their jobs, the differences of it, the expertise, the names of the people of sciences were and are used remotely as systems tactical ulterior from that which is science, A through Z, differences. It shows us that we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, with the exceptions part. Vaccines, in other words, control each heart. Control each mind, but free each heart. Vaccines, in other words. So nature, one of the things that we are capable of discerning since we are little kids, you guys are taught to speak away from, is that and how, okay, well, this is long enough because I don't even think anybody's watching here. But in other words, for example, I never tried to seek him out in my life. There's a Craig Oliveri and there's an Eric Oliveri. And they're involved with the Joshua Stryker, with former director of the F.B.I., former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which makes groupings of criminal enterprises where this is relative was originally instilled. Nature is communicating about group. Tactical ulterior from how the breaching method assigned. Role self-valued. Speaking about differences. And group differences, individual differences, company differences, countries differences. Any grouping of countries differences. In other words, people want to use their knowledge of good and evil. Like, where's this Ukraine coming from? Well, this is what economics is about. You guys are preventing, you're forcing collusion too. Nature and our founders wanted us to know the difference between the value of economics, the value of jobs. In other words, those companies. The difference between the guilt as which was behind witch trials, even if they're made up. That subject is and has been inseparable from why and how there was a witch trial place right next to where George Washington had to come to counter-extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War at Wethersfield, Connecticut, but had to leave slavery entrenched. Why and how there are still juxtaposed distinct natures of organized crime, with news locations associated with names at that spot and their sources, as people involved in all of the state judicial branch offices, all of the state corrections offices, with mass corruption with Washington, D.C., involved with predicate acts methods, too, with a change in fake and or self-value roles, with the breaching method changing and faking, influencing that, what people say. They're raised to pretend they need to pretend integrity. When did they have integrity, black pupils? Any identity of any agency? When? or any identity of law, private, when they have integrity by this. See, hyper-programming. We have to lock in, though, because this already put collusions, self-value, with each self against each self as each difference. In other words, the impositions on all locations /S, just like that on all people. They were sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly too. Because this cannot have discerned how nature communicates with us. In other words, because it would bring revelations. And there are means to discern. There are means to discern how it was, what it's actually recorded. Is that how easily, the same way they're having these kids and then adults do bad things in New York City and then go to jail. Those same people putting them away have had roles of predicate acts with facts methods per way worse as a hyper foreign. And it's there too. And it knew this breaching method made everyone only capable while blaming other things, others ourselves, and having that valued that, having been too, of using differences. And the defending them syntactically, nature-wise, tactical terror from what could defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract. Like, for example, seriousness and passions proper by the revelations and the relativity of us having had and of us having black people's rights of eye, and this having been left out, this having been separated from subject treatments with an as means and to discern to know use /S of exceptions and of exception nature, tactical terror from nature, how nature does. In short, we can mean stack we make a new nature of industry that is emitting the suits and ties, the counters, and the exceptions in a names trap. Not one of them had the capacity to defend their identities, because you don't have the identity theft, fraud, slander method against everyone allowed defended. WFSB attached me with fake conversations with them as demonstrations before their roles with names before the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. Connecticut's Channel 3 News. As collusions too with people as through time next to them and next to Fox Connecticut News. As people involved with the World Trade Center attack. Also with WTNA. It has something to do with the roles at and next to the corrections offices of Connecticut and the judicial branch offices. And the difference of that are people just driving by. This is a breaching method that used and uses self-value, not realizing names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. The law names anyone at the location, though, and tied to them. The difference between intelligence, foreign, and domestic, and they are shared there and here. A whole bunch of ways, influence to pretend not to realize things. And where and how it is relative, where there is this theater /hyper theater as criminal insidiousness /hyper criminal insidiousness at locations and online that will jump involved when people mention predicate acts about serious things and method, let alone methods of them. Whole methods of them were generated by the singular predicate act by that of putting that in the law. And all those other laws. Why would you separate that? In other words, there is and has been worse than criminal incompetence. Speaking about slavery and how they wrote the laws, leaving out how those crazy slavery laws were in books at the same time against everyone. Crazy, what everyone was being sensed from abroad, but it was also from hyper abroad. But not one of them had the identity of sophistication to be able to counter that. And all identities of sophistication had been forged only if to be contrast, identity through contrast to the other selves, as location / S everywhere the species body is, to maintain syntax possession. Not physical, not monetary. Once it has that, it doesn't need anything else. Has all blind, can prepare the mind, the species body move, all train. In other words, so there are impositions with per CNN sources. They talked about how nuclear works, and you have to keep cooling water down. I mean, you have to keep cooling things down with water. Otherwise, you have nuclear reaction. So that makes defense needs. So even if countries don't have nuclear weapons, now there are hypersonic weapons. And suits and ties, counters and exceptions. You play these games. You bring up oh, this side, the Holocaust side, that side, and you guys leave out the black pupils against every side. Every side has a little piece. They know every side is fake. But how come, in other words, no one's going for the species body side? Individual side, or the difference between that or the individual finite. So you guys are using systems tactical terror grouped properly. You just have one person speaking. In other words, everyone changes. Everyone has self-value roles. Facebook has roles with a whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Julian. And there's one that looked like, in other words, I would never party with a Joshua Julian. There are proofs that he had a whole bunch of people tied to a Daryl Chandler and a Joshua Julian, an intelligence community with a Darth Vader at Trinity College, involved with my neighbors, ones with the name Cololo. Confirmed too. They confessed that Joe Aiello was involved with them, and a Joe DeMoro, and confirmed, and a John Maiano, and he confirmed too, as ones next who have houses, have businesses next, and roles of people next to Harper Hospital through time. Involved also with their educators, putting fake things in databases. And with a whole bunch of people with forensics locations. Joshua Julian is one of the ones on YouTube with former director of the FBI involved with predicate acts, with World Trade Center predicate acts, with a whole bunch of people tied to and as a Joshua Julian, as one's involved with him. Also with a Phil Cololo. There's a Phil Cololo involved with Whiting Forensics and a Bob Chase. And the interbranch have been forging and switching names and putting fake transcripts in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people of all ages. And sick is the integrity relative to how the suburbs are manifest and how space impositions with its money, the same ones can't take the answers properly. Because in other words, the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, with slavery entrenched, a torture, extortion, slavery, fact, human nature, slavery, and physical. We know this. We can observe this. People will debate this. A certain type of sick bully, they'll use their difference too. In other words, male, female, in other words, there's differences, rackets. Again, black pupils. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, because nature itself is showing us it's that difference. All the parts of our body are shown. All the parts of your body are shown your complete identity is their difference. And your identity is that difference. The identity of the hyper-simultaneous nature. It is an identity making more of its identity of volume. This is per the ancients. Through temporary / lasting space nature. Now, I didn't hear it that way anywhere else, but I heard from one of the names involved. There are people with the name Riley. I did not respond to her roles. She has roles with some people involved with fire departments in other countries, and all and I don't want to go into it, but it's judges, family members too that were planting evidences that year, and all along Route 3, and with names next to campuses planting evidences has something to do with, in other words. And when I was in high school, a subby Bajeria or someone wanted me to throw a thing at a window. I threw it on the ground. And then they pretended other in the court. In other words, as people involved with this, they have all kind. They have increasingly people with the courts involved with the Ray Colo and the Joe DeMoro at and next to the state corrections offices, with a whole bunch of people with Connecticut boxing gyms. Also, Eric Burgess is one of my sources, and others with the military, like a Justin Klavinskis. He recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He has roles with people with the name O'Brien and others in my area, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, all along Route 175. They acted so they could make lies to people about that and sequence shifts. Had something to do with their roles with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids, and abuses of their own kids. And the difference of that is also used. And these are people further involved with the increasing impositions intercampuses and next to them, with the interbranch refusing to get on paper. And they already attached me and everyone around me and kids and everyone around them to fake conversations with themselves and others. And the principal upskirt nature had roles with way worse, with a retired police chief from Wethersfield, a police chief Cintron, and it has something to do with their roles with a Leahy family, and people with the name Lombardo have roles with some untimely deaths, and people at the community center and all sides of the community center have roles of the World Trade Center attack tied to their roles of predicate acts with databases and with all natures, all sides of criminal and civil cases, all natures of investigations. Investigators use remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw relative to this black pupils. Don't forget and don't let go. Attend. Campus Marcius calls us home again. So in other words, what caused World War I, II, is that breaching method was entrenched in semi-ancient times. The criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought database relationships. The only reason that's thought debatable is because no one's following the rules when people use short words proper. Things that are not debatable are only gotten away with because they're using little tricks. That's collusion /S. There's function /S. There are functions by putting predicate acts roles at every campus at each age and nature of them and with the names next to them. Is a simple method used by this breaching, having been used by this breaching method. Then it showed roles with itself off the record that are manifest. How to keep with their roles caused, blamed on other things others themselves, and how to sense. If consciousness is coming other vaccines. All we have to do is admit that they're locked into being not allowed to go into details. The countries with nuclear weapons, even peaceful nuclear, and allowed the ones on the edge of war because they have things they can't explain properly. We're going to allow them to help at the same way the whole world will help them if they help the whole world. We just have to put this down. I'll gather around. See, pantheism is designed for this, boxing. Oh, pantheism is about a whole bunch of gods. We're going to examine the God variable. The ancients were led by there's a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. and there's a method of checking. See, we have our programming. We check. It says, see, Native American, the hyper Native American system is abridged. But you guys can't see a Native Americans properly because you pretend it's debatable. The truth that their education had been tactically denatured to use impositions to take and manifest in their syntax with that. With a quality of fact, human nature entertained. In other words, they're taken to identity theft, fraud, slanders, just like ourselves. In other words, and with needs to respond to this. Because the breaching method knew that nature itself would continue to demonstrate to us with negative value nature progressions, actions with criminal and ceaseless natures and positives, also used as collusions. Because we could discern this where and how the breaching method has had relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, while it is being demonstrated by nature itself. Again, for example, as that value, as one of those values that is true always, what slavery was about. Again, we cannot leave this subject apart from how it was sickly non-distinctly against everyone, and how that, even though it is a value to everyone, it is replaced, and how that is self-value. Because how that appears to be, what the reasons that appear to be with that, they are also used to hide behind by the breaching method. It is a programming method. But we have hyper-intelligence coming. In other words, but we have to have the rules followed first. There is name switching and forging, as the ones involved with Russians in Ukraine, families in America and Connecticut, involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, through other natures of collusions, and we were like with the people associated with them at their campuses, and ones involved in their cities, timing where I was going to be, as the ones involved with the police switching and forging names, lying about what people think about the police. When in other words, there's bullying logic where they tell it's good about the police or bad about the police. In other words, or the courts. So in other words, nature, because that's how nature shows us. Nature works with relativity / hyper-relativity, tactical ulterior. From what names A through Z could afford, discern, because of how the breaching method shows them, how the breaching method uses names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the formal law names. The difference between that, their family members, the neighbors next to everyone, that difference is used too. It screens the foreign through the hyper foreign too, because it needs things like criminal foreign influences to be blamed alone. We should never treat things even like terrorism apart from this, because it's recorded. The terrorists themselves, all sides. In other words, they use the Saudis' name remotely, identity, to keep, for example, collusions with the first part of the Old Testament between the people who attack the religion and the people defending the religion. They have self-valued roles, needs, and natures being used to prevent from discernment. Where and how the Quran, for example, comes with a part that says, only defend right here, about being honest about the name of the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. And the beginning of the Old Testament comes with a part that says, only defend right here. The Old Testament says defend. In other words, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part before it, where it has the identity of the hyper-simultaneous parsing through positive and negative, where more and more identity of forever nature is being made. Many pray. Boxing, per the ancients used pantheism / hyper-pantheism to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible, and per its method of checking, because there are distinct parts of itself. It's a distinct identity to an extent we can discern that comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. It is why and how three parts of time we know an extent of, we know of as value. The part of the past that we know is true always, to an extent, as value here now, active. And we know, like the seasons, parts of time that are not even here now. It has us showing that value here now. It is, we are being shown its identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. Again, it is why and how. It is how participle natures are grouped as the identity of the verb. Well, not, but anyway, vaccines is why and how each individual is grouped as a species body. Nature is showing us there are other species bodies that have the same qualities, aspects of nature distinctly, non-distinctly, / hyper simultaneously. And simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, because there are distinct ways, identities of hyper invisible but still discernible of its own body. Invisible but still discernible is what is appreciating the gases and their elements coming through cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall / S, and the water and its elements. So with those three, there's appreciation of this. In other words, we're going to discern, because it's distinctly the difference between. This comes with appreciation. The difference between discern. Okay, we'll get to this because it's too long. But in other words, with Russia and Ukraine and America, all stacked means. In other words, we have to have one side, all sides set to lead it, just like they do with programming, last second compiling, I believe it's for JavaScript or Python. We have to fit in at the last second to work with the the low level part of the computer, they call it. In other words, all we have to do is admit and observe how everyone was forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to blame things that were caused on others, to blame on other things other than themselves, things that were caused by how the suburbs in America to Russia to Ukraine. They have a design that came from before America's founders were born. They have a design where that is increasingly incapable of affording to be, or let alone to be to discern even the identity of the ground's identity of relationship to itself and the value of itself that is communicating. It wants us to appreciate and expand. We don't hunger and thirst to have water in plastic bottles. There are exceptions, obviously. I go and buy the plastic waters in the bottle too, because there are no other options. See, nature shows a function by, for example, there are the worms in the rain. When there's rain on the top of a pond, there are no longer bugs landing on the surface of water, just hanging out on the surface of water. Boom, they get eaten by a fish. There's a constant food supply for fish. In the rain, when that's no longer there, worms walk into bodies of water, not just into puddles, and they drown there. They are serving a function. See, nature makes positive value nature progressions, acts, means out of nature, out of nowhere. But also, we have to appreciate the difference between making positive, the difference between making positive out of negative, or making hyper positive out of negative. Because just positive out of negative and all the positives stay criminal and insidious natures of positive treatments as collusions with the negatives to keep from discernment the identity of the breaching method with an identity of relativity to ourselves, individually grouped and together. And where and how this is a subject, campuses A through Z, communicating and having communicated other for America's founders behind James Madison and his plan, and for then George Washington and his roles with that plan, and for regarding really why and how slavery was left entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies. It was entrenched by a human fact-keeping nature breaching method that has not been uprooted. The Civil War was, for example, to a great extent used to effectively measure and maintain voices of the human species body from the north and the south, self-valuing their differences when they fight with each other syntactically, used remotely by the breaching method as the hyperforeign, needing other things, others, or selves, like criminal foreign influences, blamed at all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body is. And that forces leaders to, for example, in other words, when there has been, in other words, all they have to do is admit it's not because they don't have jobs. The people stacked in New York City. You have to walk down that building and then go to the school and go to the event and be adult. This is a breaching method employed. We have to do everything simultaneously. We have to be aware simultaneously of the breaching method use / of the difference between the cities and the suburbs, where and how it only allowed the cities to unfold that way. It designed the suburbs with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies sickly distinctly. It can be discerned, having been conscious use / s of the differences too, of how it's non-distinctly people speaking for integrity anyway. So you have to understand the depth of what is involved when you have things like that and having been entrenched. When you speak on history, when you speak about the moment, black pupils. Thank you. In other words, we can mean stack. We have the means to have everyone agree. Every species body always do is admit, and where blame is forced, we have to blame to explain things. Don't leave out the breaching method. Please, get Judge Napolitano to get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. I'll show you how then, because I don't even know all their names. They have some guy. It has something to do with their roles of where the Wethersfield police station is now. And in other words, they have roles with violence and weapons and bug spray. As people that aren't police, even if they're police or intelligence, and their family members through time, they have roles with the Wethersfield town offices. Increasingly, too, the public television is involved with people on Valley Crest in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Is increasingly involved. See them blocking the posts that anyone to comment on the town offices, and see them pretending they have integrity. Like first they had in the national, someone used the word decorum, and then they had it with the Wethersfield town offices. These are people further involved with the child abusers, leaders of kids, intercities who are recorded time use / s of collusions roles with. That's why it's important to get them on paper, and the retired police chiefs and their family members of pretty soon. And in other words, a moment, because this is all syntax, and you brought it up. If you don't want to be man, please Simchan, get them on paper, one name in sequence. I want a response for your confessions of your officers tied to you and switching and forging names. and roles with whiting forensics with this Joshua Juliet. Through time with whiting forensic with state police families, interstates with the ones above here, with the Phil Collo and the principal child offender and the Bob Chase's confessions. Let's get them on paper. Let's go. I want a response from the schools too. The news planted WFSB attached me to fake conversations with them. Please, WFSB, do what's right. Two, WTNH. Do what's right, please. I'll show you. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, he's involved with this. His co-defendants, their family members, their neighbors, people next to Fox Connecticut News, people next to WTNH. I'm going to show you where and how and why, what's really manifest. In other words, there are so many things that are so costing, even economically too. But when it comes to the economic side, you guys can handle it because it's juxtaposed by the breaching method for this. All we have to do is admit injunctive reliefs and get the help that Judge Napolitano would help us with, you know. I can compensate you. You know, we have to compensate, but mandated law is that you don't play these games, forging and switching names and hiding what came first. Has something to do too. In other words, so two speech class teachers I had. I never had, in other words, I never had personal conversation with them, but they have roles of people with Washington D.C. and all from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut, all along Route 175 and conjunctions to it and the natures of that. That is used remotely, criminally foreign influence as people involved leading up to the World Trade Center attack, long term, short term, and then since. Increasing stacking predicate acts. These are people intercities have been doing this. Multiple police departments have wire crimes in the same house, /S. Also with the police phones, families, and note the day of 9/11. These are people with all sides of the criminal and civil cases, and a case in the Ninth Circuit Court next to a civil case in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center, the day of the attack. In other words, involved, and it was also inside the court that changed the date on papers too. And then those are the people that have interstates roles with this, and with WFSB is leaking. Their intelligence is leaking with them. Has something to do with their roles with I believe it's Morgan Circle, but there's I'm going to say the street wrong, but Ballycrest in Wethersfield, I'm sure that's the name of the street, has something to do with a bunch of people and with the intelligence community involved with the FBI and with courts that have been planting evidences with Wethersfield police and locations associated with them, and all along Route 175. Has something to do with their roles also with wire crimes with Wethersfield Pizza. Stephen Stockel has identity theft. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He has people from Central Connecticut State University and from Wethersfield campuses involved with child offenders, identity theft, fraud, slanders against me. A whole bunch of people tied to him. In other words, I don't want to repeat what they pretend. And their neighbors has something to do with their roles all along Route 175 too, and its conjunctions. And their roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases and all sides of campuses planting cover-ups of lie progression, fake ties to people. They try to make it, fake thing. With wire crimes to the Wethersfield police, they have some wire crime fake transcripts ties to me with them, with police that are forging and switching names, refusing to identify themselves, intercities. I never saw Maria Pizzino on a Wethersfield campus of my life, too, by the way. It's something to do with a whole bunch of people tied to also acting professors involved with this. In the different departments, there are conscious use /S of the differences of the sciences and of the names of the people of the sciences with their sensibilities, to use the phrase of Jane Austen, but to use as a dictionary definition of it, and to use it conscious that the breaching method was left out by her own sense and sensibilities too, because In other words, as we're going to observe other things, others ourselves, we're taught to be blamed. Things that that our founders and that nature itself communicated for us to blame on the human fact, human nature breaching method. And see, in other words, there were our roles with U/S of that. In other words, there are a whole bunch of phenomena like associated with, like there are people with the name Mark Violet, and there's a Justin Kovitskas who sought me out from other areas. And then I found out because then they're trying to put me fake ties to them and say grouping with them with the ones that are involved with the wire per crimes with the police right now that are switching and forging names, made confessions. And I still didn't get a response for the principal child abuser's confessions. There is a Michael Emmett recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a whole bunch of people involved with that, and retired mayors, and people involved with all natures of politicians, but increasingly people tied to mayors since I was a kid have roles of predicate acts with facts methods that are recorded being and haven't been bound consciously by a breaching method that is using their roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, black KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed. At the same time, they're using their differences into even their sexual groups. They even have a guy in a dress at the corner uh, of one of the streets involved with the World Trade Center predicate acts, planting cover-ups, predicate acts methods, and his educators involved with and has more child defenders, leaders of kids first forced, including ones from other classes that aren't even know the other kids. They're doing little tricks like that because there are functions by that. It's not just by accident. There's a fake integrity act. Countries A through Z, they have nuclear weapons. That's the result. That's the result. That would have the suburbs still designed before cars, the suburbs, and let alone the cities. In other words, that's why they're. In other words, we keep cutting the grass, taking the grass away. There were no worms. There's no water, fresh water for them to walk into. But now the birds don't have food either. See, nature shows us what causes positive or negative value nature progression. Nature shows us the difference between criminal and citizens. Nature is a positive or positive. That's a hyper positive. It shows us the value of checking too. It's part of what causes evolution's food scarce means of that identity of hyper sophistication. That leads hyper programming. That leads hyper intelligence. See, hyper intelligence. It's recorded these AIs are scams. They are criminal, but with people with roles that need to pretend not to realize. So they pretend they're against privacy. These are identity rackets pretending they're showing that they need to be going, make a subject of privacy. In other words, you guys have to realize we have to not take it personal to and leave the blame on the breaching method, because it wouldn't be otherwise. Because they're teaching you everyone how to speak for difference /S tactical terror from how nature is communicating with difference. That's how we could discern its body. Vaccines, just things, but long. Increasingly, there are people associated with the spots next to the state capitol who had been involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, faking motivations, because behavior racketeering at locations. They have people covered up, tied to their roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the laws named at the same time, put in the same sequence shifts, time collusions at the crime scenes. Like New Britain Superior Court has a whole bunch of collusions with the principal child offender. There's people involved with other child offenders in the past. There's a Kerr family and a Perron family, also involved with spots next to Fox Connecticut News and churches, groups with child offenders, leaders of the kids, identity theft, fraud, slanders, medical offenders of kids. They have something to do with their roles with security at Harper Hospital, with the World Trade Center, foreign and domestic military. These are differences, racket natures with the religions too. A Riley family said that she repeated sexual things to me about sexual intercourse or sexual kissing and things. Repeated that to me in front of my classmates about my neighbor when I was in algebra and regarding to the alphabet. No, I have an alphabet decipher website, but I'm trying to get it on Wix or Wiki, GoDaddy. GoDaddy. I have a standard domain name. I want to upload the HTML. But it's like it's not all the directions to do it show that other than what is being shown on the screen. In other words, we spent hours. Does anybody know? You know how I could do this because apparently we're supposed to be able to have space that we could upload our HTML. But this, because in other words, it's not that's for GoDaddy, but all these sites have like seems to be the nature of it is changing. In other words, and the questions. So people have to ask questions. People have motivation. Oh, well, this is our business because we're doing it this way now. In other words, that's the right. But the nature of debate. This is also comes to use of location /s, and not just extraterritorial, but hyper extraterritorial. Impositions and roles with this method /s have nothing to. In other words, it just needs apparent motivations to be seen by others, and when looking back too. So it has been stacking fake things, vaccines. So please, WFSB is Connecticut's Channel 3 News. WTNH and Fox Connecticut News, names next to them. They have roles with a whole bunch of different natures of organized crime, acts, with the investigators are tied to them and their sources in their branch, all sides of criminal civil cases and relative body dumping spots, and next to them, even if they're made up, and the names involved, reported killers too. As the ones involved intercities with the social media also used to confirm things involved with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices and people who have been stacking, fake things in databases. That's why, in other words, with the interbranch have been refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and they have roles with violence and these gangs where they're pretending they don't realize they're stacking fake things in databases at interbranch location as collusions. Then they have to hide that later. And a breaching method showed them how they did that and had to hide that too. And they showed them they have to hide with how they hid that. It's not just by accident. People stay dumb, pretending they don't realize the significance of us having black pupils, whites of eyes. A breaching method assigned that. Other communicated for nature, then nature communicates with that, except for nature when it's criminal insidiousness. So in other words, nature, there is natural law, but they pretend it's debatable because everyone went into, you guys were child abused at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, states A through Z. For real, you guys were child abused. How could you leave out these things? Vaccines. And the World Trade Center predicate acts. WFSB, please respond. Help me now. Let's get to the because it's more than that, just that. And you guys are playing games because I don't know all the names of the people with the violence involved. I know how we could get to them and where they're associated, what they've been doing, like with the Wethersfield town offices and names at Valley Crest and their roles on social media and next to where the Wethersfield police are now. Where's the police chief son Tron live? And see, Wethersfield Pizza House is also involved with the wire crime acts and methods of the police switching and forging names. And they're involved further with the inter-campuses, intra-cities, and intercities, and intra-campus, and inter-campus, each one. See, this breaching method showed the identities of the law, for example, of sciences A through Z, how it used their names individually grouped together, their differences. It had them roles with how to value properly. Each age of fact, human nature is different still. All exceptions, exception nature. Oh, but they make instances treatments on a mass scale. The intelligence community makes it's a domestic. When people start yelling, they have all kinds of predicate acts and facts methods, identity theft fraud, sequence shift, self value, all kinds of collusions. Forgiveness is not to say, oh, okay, but you are convicted. No. Forgiveness is to focus on the actual acts and the predicate acts, the ones the most important. Like the whole predicate acts with facts method of countries pretending they have integrity anywhere, and they have nuclear weapons all this time. Let alone even the nuclear positions of the peaceful, and they could get away, and there's still styles pretending that they could that things are debatable that are not even debatable. Black pupils, we have means superior. We will get them. But in other words, please get Judge Napolitano from Judging Freedom to get the Wethersfield Police on paper, one name in sequence, with the police chief Centron and the police that confessed him involved with them with the switching names and confessions. And I want a response for his roles with the principal child abusers confessions too, and other names he brought up, like a Mike Levine, and people along Route 3, off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. I want them on paper now because nature wants that. So you get them on paper. Get them on paper. Why do I have to beg? Please get them on paper. Judge Napolitano, please do what's right. The using and have used wire and mail crimes. Wethersfield Police pretended they had conversations with me at the police station as a kid and here at my house. In other words, I didn't have it there either. I had no conversations with them. The kids that they did have go down to the police station and have a conversation with them. They did that to make it look like I knew him before then. And they made a fake exception with a Tiger Cub meeting with a Chris Walters. He has something to do with the intelligence community, people that raised him. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Now, you need to they have more people with the school. They're playing sensibilities, and they're bringing up their own names so they can lie about the responses. These are people with whiting forensics, too, increasingly. State police, interstates, with the same house with the wire crimes, with this Mendez police, too, attached me to fake conversations with them at the Wethersfield police station. They stole a sentence I said to my friend, and put it, but like I said it to the Mendez. In other words, because they were involved when I was a kid too. I don't even know where they lived. I don't even know where they live. Attaching it. I looked up where the Mendez name. There's one next to a Montessori school, and there's one in Wethersfield about in the Montessori school. In other words, they're putting fake things in databases. These are ones further involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. A whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital next to them with the name Ayano, with the name Aiello, and tomorrow involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. A whole bunch of people tied to them with state police, and with that spot with Eric Jensen, Mike Violet. They have something to do with their roles with spots next to the state capitol. Their roles with a whole bunch of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and the ones involved with the wire crimes, with the police forging, switching names, prevented me writing since I was a kid, so they could play these games. Get them on paper, one name in secret, please. Fake branches, bow. Vaccines, prepare. Please, Judge Napolitano, please do what's right. This is very simple. I want and get Judge have WFSB do what's mandated to them. Get me off the fake conversations with them and the change fake locations with them too. Fake sequence. Fake communications with people around me. They lied about the outcome of legal cases too. As collusions with federal criminals in those cases and their lawyer and the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. He's also involved with his lawyer, this Robert Chevrolet, and names next to where his law office was, next to the state capitol, not far from it, and other spots in East Hartford. This is another guy involved with what with next to Fox Connecticut News, the predicate acts of facts methods, increasingly. So get them on payment. And and Hartford Hospital, they name drop people and walked away. 3 times I was forced for mental evaluation there. We has 3 confirmations of their roles, increasingly with people tied to Kevin Dillon, and no, as Kevin Dillon, and he's been trying to make fights between me and my neighbors since I was a kid. In other words, he's been planting evidence on all sides of my house and all sides of their houses. Roles with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, their teachers. They're putting fake things in databases. There's a Joshua Stryker at Trinity College involved with my past neighbors, involved with some untimely deaths and identity thefts and frauds with some girl confessed as a girl and then as a kid at corner. She's increasingly at corner, then pretend she knows me. And walk into my science class, make a fake exception of knowing me. In other words, it has something to do. They keep bringing up to, and then they say, well, why are you bringing up people from the past? They brought it up. I don't even know them. These are the ones involved with this Joshua Julian. I don't know at all. He's pretending I don't remember him. No, these are people putting fake things in databases. They make a fake exception because they can't afford what is really recorded to be discerned. In other words, the only time one time real quick on my campus in 5th grade, I saw Joe DeMorrow. I didn't even know who he was before that until middle school. I saw him again. He confessed further with his brother. They have roles with people in my 4th grade and 6th grade class with body dump. People increasingly tied to body dumping spots involved with Joe DeMorrow. And a maze presented me by a Mr. Abruzzi, my 5th grade teacher, who is increasingly people confessed that Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, involved with this guy. And in other words, and this DeMorrow family on Valley Crest and people tied to them. I believe there's a Finelli. I don't know if it's the right name. I never had a class with Christopher Finelli. He walked by me one trying to make a fake exception of knowing me. And with a legal agreement, we're selling him a thing because he came up to me, asked me if he wanted to buy it. And there's also another thing that ties people involved with the World Trade Center attack. Total strangers, they asked me if I wanted to buy things, and that's also the only reason. The only time I ever, 2 times there's a Subby Bajario who has been planting evidences with judges and prosecutors in foreign countries and child defenders, including mixed natures, including medical, whole bunch of foreign and domestic medical families involved with putting fake transcripts, hiding lipoaggressions, hiding U/S of different/S, all natures of them. Again, black pupils. Nature showing us its body when we are shown the same color eyes, at the same time. It's the body of Christ. No, just kidding. No, but they're not kidding. No, but the body of Christ, is it discernible or not with the details, with the group, and with the, in other words, pantheism returns. But we're going to observe takes on pantheism having been about multiple gods. As roles used consciously to keep out why and how. In other words, they're real, because we're different country, different language. But there's a function by it being hyper invisible but still discernible. That identity again has those 3 parts of time. It's showing us them grouped, but it also shows us there's that part of time before that we know that we don't know about. There's a part of time. There's the things that are active right now we know we don't know about. And there's a time beyond the seasons, the values that we know about now. There's that part of the time we know we don't know about. There's 3 ways grouped. Trinity. But there's 5 ways too. We'll examine this. But to do it, you guys have to follow mandated law, obligated. with care proper. See, you guys can't do it. In other words, because they were collusion /S at all locations /S. And the difference of that, because that's what the breaching method needs to hide behind, an additional name that we need to value here. Because he needs to hide behind that.